Hey guys, this is Justin. Hello and welcome to another video. Today we will be discussing one of the most iconic ships of the prequels, the N1 Starfighter. I often hear that when people recommend Star Wars to new viewers, they say to start with Episode 2, and I don't agree with that for a variety of reasons, including the fact that if you skip Episode 1, you miss out on some really cool designs and aesthetic sensibilities. Everything looked a little different after Episode 1. But I mean, for all of us in 1999, the prequels, wow. You could not create a universe more different than the original trilogy. You know, everything seems lived in, half falling apart, made out of batteries and scrap metal. Then you have the elegance of the prequels, the elegance of the Naboo, and of course, the N1 Starfighter. The N1 Starfighter famously propels a small Naboo security force, including one child, Anakin Skywalker, to an effective defense of the planet against the Trade Federation. Later, we see it escorting Naboo royal starships, but aside from a few other appearances, including in canon, of course, as the base for the Mandalorian's revamped Starfighter, the N1 doesn't see a ton of use. Why is that? Well, let's go over it. By the way, about a year ago, I did a video on Naboo ships as a whole. This one will be just on the N1. Listen, we're over 2,000 videos. There's going to be a bit of repetition at this point. At the end, we'll also talk a bit about some of the N1 variants. Before we get into today's video, however, we are sponsored by ourselves. The next two ships for the Eckhart's Ladder Fleet Builder are almost ready in sticker and magnet form. Talking the top-down models specifically, right now we've got the Star Destroyer up, which I'll link down below. The Venator and the Nebula should be up within the next couple of days. Here's some of the rough art. It's all completely new, commissioned, not AI. It's great. Also, all the ships will be to scale, so you can build your own proper fleets, and I've just put an order in for 20 more designs, so it should be a ton of fun. You can get started now, again, link below. Anyway, when talking about the N1, I always like to start with the novel Plagueis. Plagueis gives us a look at the years immediately preceding and the year of The Phantom Menace. In the novel, we learn the Naboo starfighters were actually fairly controversial among the population of the planet itself. The Naboo were extremely environmentally aware, and even the N1s, which were better than most, were seen by many as a step too far, especially as other environmentally deleterious programs like the creation of the plasma refinery we see Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon fight Maul in are pushed into production. The N1, however, was seen at the time as a potentially useful deterrent for any hostile action by the Trade Federation, with the king at the time getting guarantees from both Theed Engineering and Nubian Design that the Lucrehulk would be easy prey for the N1. This was, however, before the Senate gave the Trade Federation the rights to further upgrade their Lucrehulks with both droid starfighters and turbo lasers. So, in a way, by the time it was needed, the N1 was already outclassed. Keep in mind, at the time of the N1's creation, there were serious limits on what could be constructed to defend one's home system. This was within the era of the Ruusan Reformation, so while individual system defense did largely come down to the defense forces of those systems and planets, there was also legislated limits on the type of weaponry which could be created. So in a way, you're holding back the strength of your ships because a potential enemy also has to hold back the strength of theirs. This did mostly apply to capital ships, but it's one of the reasons the N1 would perhaps be considered undertuned. Obviously, to a degree, the invasion of Naboo, but certainly the Clone Wars threw all plans into disarray, and soon the galaxy was building up for war. By the way, I wish we knew more about the capital ships used by sector defense forces instead of just the Republic. Presumably, there were planets once the Clone Wars started, which began pumping out monstrosities. Anyway, it was part of this implied limitation on ship design, which allowed the Naboo to get a little extra. The Naboo are always a little extra. The N1 is just such a great example. Let me read again from Plagueis. Their targets were only asteroids, but the chromium-nosed yellow starfighters attacked the micro-cratered rocks as if they posed a threat to Naboo itself. Products of the Theed Space Vessel Engineering Corporation and Nubian Design, and King Varuna's pet project Census Coordination, The sleek, short-winged craft exemplified Naboo's infatuation with classic design and flagrant excellence. The Starfighters engines were said to have set a new standard for emissions control, but for a world that prided itself on environmental awareness, the N1 seemed entirely out of character and out of place. So the N1 is described as being purposefully extravagant and really just beautiful, with an engine built around, more than anything else, environmental awareness and emissions control. Listen, once the Clone Wars started, once the Empire got into power, no one had a whole lot of time for beauty or emissions control. I mean, look at the Y-Wing. That thing was a workhorse and ugly as sin. So really, that's a big part of it. Outside of prosperous peacetime, it just wasn't practical to make the N1, especially because the Naboo were also benefiting economically from the creation of that new plasma refinery. And even with all that, the Defense Corps still only made several squadrons of the main starfighter. According to the New Essential Guide to Weapons and Technology, prior to the Battle of Naboo, the N1 was reserved for reconnaissance missions, escort duties, and ceremonial functions. It's implied to be only lightly shielded, though decently well armed. I doubt its laser cannon is anything to write home about, but it did somehow manage to store 10 proton torpedoes. Not bad. It's just, there were lots and lots of other fighters which could do something very similar, but where you didn't have to pay an extra 100,000 credits for eco mode. We know before the N1, the Naboo considered using Z95s. They were seen as less effective, but there were also many models of Z95, and it would have been, I think, a much more attractive planetary defense ship than the N1. There are many other options as well. I should probably do a video on common planetary defense ships, but for example, the Cloak Shape probably would have been less agile, but similarly well armed and more durable than the N1. The same would be true of the Prey Bird, although it was a much later design, only seeing service just before the Battle of Endor and in a limited capacity. But there was also the Pinook, and one of my favorites. This one comes directly from Star Wars X-Wing Alliance, the Planetary Defender Starfighter. I mean, look at that name. Again, whether these would have strictly outcompeted the N1 would have been determined on a case-by-case basis. However, they would have been significantly cheaper. What money you did spend would have went to more practical aspects of the design. You're not spending all that extra money on chrome or environmentally friendly engines. And perhaps most importantly, they would have been significantly easier for planets and systems across the galaxy to take care of. Ditto for the Rebel Alliance. Would the Rebels have taken N1s if they were available? Sure, many planets would have as well. However, given the fact that they were produced by one pretty minor world, which may not even have produced them after the Clone Wars, the N1 would have been difficult to repair. There would have been a shortage of parts and experts working on the ships. Just generally, it makes sense to go with what's more common. That's not to say the N1 never appeared in Star Wars canon. It's been kind of all over the place. We see N1s during the Battle of Exegol. In Shattered Empire, N1s helped defend Naboo during Operation Cinder, and they were around. The Rebel Alliance had some, same with Star Wars canon, but they always really did remain a symbol of a somewhat niche and, on a galactic scale, relatively unimportant world. Naboo was really never more important, I'd say, than when it was exporting that plasma and was becoming a major economic player in the region. Also, I gave my editor Mara a heads up that I was going to be working on this video, and she mentioned that I should look at both N1 variants and some of the concept art, so let's do so briefly. The N1 at one point was imagined to have what's labeled a rocket pod. This would have slid back to allow access to the astromech, and I'm guessing that's an intake on the top, and it could have given the ship a little extra boost. It makes sense, sort of falls in line with what George Lucas really appreciated about the stylized car racing of the, I guess, 50s. There were also different starfighter variants. The New Essential Guide to Vehicles and Vessels, for example, mentions a blue N1 police cruiser, which was similar but had tuned down weapons and shields. They served not only as police craft but also as training vehicles before pilots moved up to the full N1. I'll admit, I've never played Star Wars Battle of Naboo. Is that something I should do on the gaming channel, by the way? Is it worth it? But there is a profile of the Naboo bomber from that game in Star Wars Gamer issue number 5. What a cool-ass magazine, by the way. Unlike many bombers in Star Wars, the N1 bomber is designed as an anti-ground unit fighter, which doctrinally kind of weird for the Naboo. but I mean, I'm sure it was also fine against capital ships. The big thing was that it carried ion bombs, and I gotta say, I like the design. It's got this sort of B-2 look of some of the Naboo cruisers combined with the fighter. Pretty cool. Galactic Battlegrounds also added several other starfighter variants, including a bomber and an advanced N1, but these are mostly for game design purposes, so there's not a whole lot else to them. But those are just my thoughts. I'm sure you'll let me know all of yours and more down below. Don't forget, the stickers are available, and if you'd like to ask me a question for a future video, leave it in the comments with the hashtag AskAck. May the Force be with you.